to Inner Peace, Better Health. Listeners, this is your host, Sana, and today's conversation is really interesting and really endearing. I am joined by Serena Low. She is former lawyer turned introvert coach. She helps quiet achievers find their voice and power. And we are diving into the raw and real intersections of trauma, cultural norms, and what it really means to feel safe. So, with that, Serena, welcome to the show, and I'm really honored to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Sana, for having me here.
Okay. Okay. So Serena, let's start with since you um, talk about trauma in quiet achievers. So, in this context, how do you define trauma, and how does it silently show up in high functioning, ambitious, but maybe like introvert individuals?
That's such a good question, Sana. So, what I've observed with introverts and high achievers is that while technically they are very expert in what they do in their domain, there's also this element of self doubt, of imposter syndrome, of
Hmm.
I'm not good enough, and also people telling them that they are too quiet, they need to speak up more. And so the combination, I think, seems to reinforce the idea that because they are quiet, because they're reserved, because they're such deep thinkers, that there's something wrong with them, that they need to change their way in order to
Yeah.
fit it with how the culture is. So, of course, this is culture dependent. So, where I am is a very extrovert biased culture. So, the louder you talk, the more you tend to stand out and the more
Yeah.
people notice you. So, of course, the introvert being the way that we don't like to talk for the sake of talking. We talk when we have something meaningful to say. But the
Exactly.
thing is, the conversation, the meeting doesn't always allow for that space for the introvert to process their thoughts before they speak. So then, what unfortunately can happen is that the introverted team member is perceived as not contributing enough,
Hmm.
as being, recognized, yes, as a quiet achiever, good in their work, but somehow always in the background, passed over, not noticed, and so therefore not being able to access the same opportunities as others who are louder and more confident.
No, I have I have actually, because I'm not exactly an introvert. I can be ambivert. This is something I very recently discovered in so many of the conversations, because I'm generally very quiet. When I was in the workplace situation, so I'm very quiet. But then, if I am in tune with someone, let's say a colleague or my manager or my friends or anyone, which where I feel that okay, this particular person will understand what I'm going to say, they will be actively listening to me, then I am like 100% expressive. But then what you said just now, Serena, that especially meetings and situations where kind of all those loud contributions are considered as the valid ones only. I have suffered because of that. In many of my feedback sessions, I have been told that you do not contribute enough. I mean, we should display that you're, working really hard and you are contributing. So that is really correct.
And
So,
to and to answer your earlier question as well as to what trauma is in for the introvert, just by speaking to a lot of introverts and quiet achievers, a thing that often comes up is the interplay of cultural conditioning, upbringing, as well as their own personality, of course, and things that may have occurred in childhood that they're not conscious
mm,
have actually shaped the way they have become. So, to give you examples, for instance, if somebody grew up in an atmosphere where they were discouraged from speaking up, and this can happen in cultures where, let's say, girls are told that in order to
yeah,
be a good girl, you need
yeah,
to be quiet, not so loud, not so talkative. You must know how to behave yourself, be demure and all that. And so we
Yes.
take all these on in our formative years, right? When we are very impressionable and we're subject to authority figures. And we think that, yes, I have to be like this. And so at that time, that works for you as a child. But then we carry that over into adulthood as well. And this is done unconsciously. So we don't even know, we're not even thinking, oh, this is because of how I was brought up. This is because of my environment. This is because of, what somebody said to me when I was 5 years old. And we don't connect those dots until much later, until something happens or someone draws it to our attention, and then we realize. And so because it's formed so early on, we don't think
Mm.
about it. It becomes embedded in our identity. And then we always show up as this good girl, as this quiet person, playing nicely and playing safely. And so not daring to speak up could result from things like this. And the reason it's a trauma for some people is because it's also associated with a lot of strong negative emotions that
Mm.
affect how we feel about ourselves, that affect how we feel inside our bodies. So we don't feel safe to speak up. And so when somebody makes us, puts us on the spot, that suddenly brings us back to that childhood self where we didn't feel safe to speak up. And so, our body reacts in a certain way that was already put into a pattern a long time ago, and we're not aware of it. So it's not so easy to override it by just saying, I need to come out of my shell. I need to be more confident,
Right.
because actually there's something deeper going on that needs to be
Something
looked
deeper.
after.
I absolutely agree. And it definitely feels like a kind of threatening to even imagine that, maybe if I speak or if I share, maybe it's going to cause conflicts, it's going to cause misunderstandings. So I would rather, because similar situations, they occurred during my childhood. It was kind of induced culturally, or maybe as per the societal norms. And that kind of, completely makes us feel like frozen and, caged within. So I absolutely agree with you, Serena.
That's a very good description, Sana. Some people do
Mm.
get frozen. There are quite a number of different coping mechanisms. There's the fight response, the flight
Mm.
response, and
Mm.
freezing, which is what you said, being frozen in your body because suddenly you're really afraid, you're put under the light, or you're put into a
Yeah.
very dangerous situation. Your body reacts in a certain way to protect you. And so freezing is the way that some people react. And that carries over into adulthood. So let's say somebody is put into the spotlight, oh, so and so, can you say a couple of words or can you do this presentation? And then we are frozen because it brings us back to that childhood memory of that time when we were powerless and we think we are that 7-year-old again, but we are not. We are maybe 40 years old now, but a part of us still believes that we are that small, helpless, powerless child.
Mm. That's I mean, horrible, but it is how it feels like. So, Serena, you mentioned that it's not easy because, it's not possible that, if even if we think that I need to get out of my shell, I need to uh, become confident, or even someone else, I mean, unintentionally, they say that you need to be confident, you need to be, expressive, whether it's in workplace or in our personal lives. It's not that easy. So, uh, how exactly do we start, Sena? Where do we start? Even if we genuinely want to uh, be a bit expressive, or is it something that we should embrace?
I think there are two ways to answer that. Number one, yes, to embrace ourselves as we are, and not to feel downhearted or feel that we are restricted because we are introverts. So a lot of people have this idea that, oh, I'm an introvert, so I can't do public selling, I can't do public speaking, I can't do marketing, I can't do networking, because I'm just like this. This is the way I am. I'm born this way. So what I invite introverts to actually look at differently is to think, I am an introvert and I can be a good public speaker. I can be good at networking. I can do sales. I can do marketing. The idea is that all these other things that don't come naturally to us, they are all skills related. And that means if are skills related, I can learn those skills, right? Because the human is capable of learning many things. And so having that growth mindset, the idea that if I put in the effort, if I hang on to it long enough, if I persevere with it, I will eventually get good at it. So that's the idea. That's one way to look at it. Um,
Mhm.
and the other is to start small. One thing I noticed with introverted high achievers is that we set ourselves a very high bar, almost
Mm.
as though we have to get 100% or the A plus grade every time, just like we did at school. And if it's 95%, 90%, it's not good enough. So I think
Mhm.
we need to give ourselves some grace, be a bit more compassionate and kind to ourselves, and say, sometimes maybe my 80% is actually good enough. It's actually better than a lot of other people's 80% because I already set such a high standard for myself of excellence. So let me try this new thing and make
Mhm.
it safe for yourself to try something. Start small. Start with something that I call it a micro step. So instead of just taking one step out, can you scale it back? What is the simplest and smallest and most achievable thing for you to do today, right now, that feels brave?
Mm.
So instead of, when you go to a networking event, instead of feeling pressured to talk to everybody and to work the room and to give out your
Mhm.
business cards to everyone, what about you just have a conversation with one new person today?
Exactly.
Just one. And then the next time you can try two and then three. And then so over time you build the capacity. But you
Yeah.
want to start in a place that feels solid for you, where you feel safe. And then when you feel safe, you will feel encouraged to go forward and try again and to do more. So it's about building capacity in a
Mhm.
sustainable way.
Mm. That is really practical and doable, and I really loved how you call it a micro step. Uh, in one of my conversations, I guess it was last year, but I still remember that we were talking about how introverts can be really good at networking. So the guest mentioned that she is an introvert. So what she does is, if the guest list is accessible or available
Mhm,
from a business point of view, not just saying it's right or wrong, but she'll just list out or filter out the ones um which she thinks, whom she thinks are strategically, they could be strategically beneficial for her to network, instead of, just like going and talking to everyone randomly and then handing over business cards.
mm,
Just maybe three or four or maybe five or six, something, some number like that. And then she'll be very mindful. She'll take, three deep breaths, and that's it. She's now in her zone and she'll go and talk to these people. And yeah, and I really kind of, retained that from that conversation.
yes, I think that's so important to prepare yourself psychologically and
Mm.
physiologically before you step into any room, any conversation, any meeting. Because for the introvert to step out, to put ourselves in the light in any way, to have attention focused on us, that makes us nervous. That's
Yeah.
just a natural part of who we are. But if you prepare yourself, if you prepare your mind, if you prepare your body and your state before you go in, it won't feel like I'm exposing myself to danger because you've already taken charge of your state. You know why you're there, just as your other guest has spoken about, being choosing people strategically based on,
Mhm.
shared objectives or something in
Yeah.
common. So also it's important to know why you're going to this event or why you are attending this meeting. Like what is your role there? What do you hope to contribute there? What kind of
Exactly.
value do you want to add there? Who do you hope to meet? So when you have these things on the top of your mind, you know what your purpose is, but also think about it in terms of an energy exchange. I'm going
Mm.
there to contribute my energy, and so are all the other people. So, what kind of energy do I want to bring? I want to bring a positive energy. I want to bring a calm energy because you know how events and meetings and networking things can be really noisy, really chaotic.
Yes.
And
Yes.
introverts by nature, we are already calm and very present, and we do things differently. We think differently. So let's bring that some of that calm energy, that ability to listen carefully and be very present. Let's bring that into the meeting, into the networking event as our contribution. And you know what? People really love that. They love a
Yeah.
good listener. They love it when someone is fully present, paying full attention, listening carefully, asking intelligent questions. They love it because if most people love talking, then who is listening? And that's
Wow.
where our gift is. That's our superpower. We are naturally really, really good at listening. And when we listen, we're also making space for someone else to articulate their thoughts. And to them, their thoughts are very important. Their point of view is very important. All they're doing is looking around to see who is listening to them, who is paying attention to them. And if we can do that for them and reflect back to them what they are saying, they feel really good about themselves. And the spillover effect is they think we are a very good conversationalist too.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
enjoy the connection with us. And you never know, having those sorts of connections, when you go and just be present and listen well and reflect back what you hear, that
Mm-hmm.
could lead to other open doors for you because
Yeah.
people go away thinking, oh, Sana is a really good listener. I enjoyed connecting with her. You should meet her too. And then, you never just, you just don't know who you're going to meet, who's going to connect you and say your name in other rooms where you're not present, right? And that's
Oh,
how we expand our networks too.
wonderful. That's, I think, but this is really such a good news, if someone is listening to our conversation and that they are an introvert and they think, oh no, I'm not going to be good in networking. I'm not going to be a good public speaker. I think this is such a great news. So, Selma, I also would love to know um, about your journey. You, I believe you grew up in Singapore.
Mhm.
So, what unspoken cultural norms around success or emotion, how have they shaped your own understanding of safety and self-worth?
Those are really good questions. To answer your first one, to do with success. So success in a Singaporean context is you have to go, go, go all the time. You have to be constantly doing something. You can't just sit quietly and reflect and ponder. You need to be seen to be doing something big. You need to be seen to be loud and out there and contributing. So in some ways, a lot of organizations would also be quite extrovert biased. So for me as an introvert, it was quite the struggle because I didn't know how to insert myself into important conversations. I didn't know how to speak up at the right time. And so I tended to get, sort of overlooked. And if I knew the things that I now know, I would approach my career very differently. And the other thing you asked was, what was the second thing you asked besides success?
Yeah, sure. So how those, cultural norms around emotions, how they have shaped your own understanding of safety and self-worth.
Right. So to do with emotions, you are generally not encouraged to show your emotions too much. You are expected to be quite stoic, to to suck it up, to not show that you are upset, and to not show vulnerability because that's perceived as weakness. So in terms of safety, it really
Mhm.
depends on who's the leadership team, what their values are. So if their values are, everybody just fulfill your KPIs, we're just here to do our work, you do our work well and then you go home. And that's the end of it. So that's one kind of culture.
Mm.
So I think what we really need is facilitators, leaders, managers who are sensitive to this idea that actually there are many more personalities in the room. It's not just about doing things one way. It's also noticing and making room for the quieter voices, for people who can communicate differently. Not everybody wants to be in the spotlight. Not everybody wants to speak up immediately. Some people take time to think, right? So if they are given alternative ways to communicate, or they are given some advance notice so that they are not put on the spot, or they are offered, let's say, a way to contribute by doing something different, say taking the minutes or having a
Mhm.
one-on-one after the meeting, or there's so many ways, creative ways to handle meetings, not just this is the only way and this is how we've always done it and so this is how we'll always do it. So in terms of safety, I think the other important thing is that we also are responsible for our own sense of safety. So
Mm.
sometimes you can't wait until the culture falls in line and it becomes, more sympathetic towards quiet people. Sometimes you have to actively go out and look for your own allies, your own champions, your own mentors,
Yeah.
or other colleagues who understand, oh, yes, Sana prefers to think about things before she says something. So give her a bit of time or,
Mm.
ask the question a different way. So if you have people like that in your corner, it's very much more helpful. But sometimes people don't know until we voice it that we have this challenge. And so it's also surrounding yourself with people who are willing to support you in becoming more visible, but without compromising who you are.
Hmm. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's in our hands. It's our choice. So, because we cannot wait just for the system or the situation or the environment to change. So, a really really empowering perspective on this, Serena. Um. Also, yeah, I mean, I think we have definitely discussed this point. Many introverts, they have learned to perform safety. I mean, they appear calm, but internally they're hyper vigilant. They are super observant. So, how do you help someone move from performing safety to actually, feeling it?
Mm. So what you're referring to, Sana, I think is how do I embody that
Mhm.
sort of safety? Because when
Mhm.
I feel it in my body, then I can project it outwards.
Exactly.
But if
Yes.
I'm just coming from my cognitive, if I'm just talking, trying to talk
Mhm.
myself into behaving differently, I can get up to a certain point, but the
Yeah.
rest of my body is not cooperating. And
Yeah.
so I think, for instance, with certain modalities where we tell people, oh, all you need is a different mindset. You just need to change your mindset. Just need to look at things differently. Just be more
Mhm.
positive. And that doesn't work. It works to a certain extent and then it stops working. And the reason it stops working is because when we talk about trauma, it does leave an impact in the body. It leaves, as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says, the body keeps the score. So the body remembers things that have happened in the past. And if those things are not looked at, if they're not addressed, if we don't give them room to process and to come out and say something, then they continue to be suppressed inside the body and they will show up in all kinds of dysfunctional ways, right?
Mm.
And they will catch us usually when we are most vulnerable and trigger something inside us. That's a coping mechanism. So what we want to do is to go back, almost go back in time and sit with that younger version of us. And there is a phrase for this, which is, called spiritual reparenting, which is that if we didn't receive the kind of care or nurturing or attention in our early years from our caregivers, it can leave a kind of residue, like a scar that makes us feel, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not seen. I'm not loved. I'm not safe.
Mhm.
And so we want to go back and sit with that younger version of ourselves and let them know it's okay. I see you. I remember, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to be here for you. And when that part of us is able to calm down, it's like sitting with a young child. Where the child feels safe and feels secure, they relax and they seem to become very, cooperative. They're easy to get along with. But when the
Mhm.
child is upset and insecure, they become very needy, they become very clingy. So that's
Yeah.
that part of us that shows up. So what we want to do is to let that part be seen and feel safe and, feel taken care of. And then
Mhm.
when we step out into our adult selves, we can show up fully. So there are a lot of different somatic therapy practices that we can
Mhm.
take someone through to help them calm their nervous system down. Basically, this is about nervous system dysregulation.
Yeah.
Because we are in that anxious, hypervigilant state that you mentioned, we don't feel safe. We want to run away, or we want to freeze up, or we want to fight back, right? What we
Right.
want is at that calm, neutral state where we realize, actually, I am in charge. I have the power to respond to this situation or this person or this conversation in a productive, mature way. And it's possible and it's safe. So when you feel that it's safe, then you want to speak up, you want to say something, and you want to express your thoughts authentically. And so that's what we do. Help that person to get to that calm, neutral state where they feel empowered.
Wow, that makes so much sense, Serena. And as you mentioned about spiritual reparenting, I was actually not aware about this. So thanks for sharing that. How does it look like in practice? I mean, does it involve different practices depending on the comfort of the person who is getting healed, or is it something like a common singular practice?
It's no singular practice, it's what's most comfortable for you. Because every person has got their own experiences, their own, way of processing emotions as well as processing information. So the practices need to be attuned to how you normally like to receive information. So for some people, it might be a very, some people might be breathing, deep breathing, breath work. For some people, it's learning to reconnect with your body. Just give yourself a hug, give yourself a pat on the back, make yourself feel loved. Mel Robbins has got this practice where she says you high five yourself in the mirror. The first thing you do, get out of your bed, we go to the bathroom, you look at yourself in the mirror. A lot of people
Mm.
start to judge themselves. Oh, why do I look like this? Oh, I got a new wrinkle. Oh my goodness, I look terrible. Instead of doing that, high five yourself and say, I love you, Sana. You are so beautiful. I see you. You are so powerful. You're going to have a great day today. We're going to do amazing things together. Things like that. When you say that, and it becomes a practice, and this I do for myself too. You start to love yourself more and more, and you feel more connected to yourself, to your younger self, to your current self, and then you can bring all of yourself to wherever you go, to work, to other relationships, to it's amazing. There's so many things that we can do. Yeah, happy to share that with you offline as well, if you would like.
One thing which I instantly kind of came to my mind is, if as a person hearing from someone else that they love me or they find me beautiful, it makes me so happy. Why can't it make me happy when I say that to myself? I think it should make me happier and fulfilled and bright too,
Yes,
on appreciating myself instead of judging myself, maybe its appearance or my shortcomings, or maybe some past decision I took which was wrong.
exactly. Exactly. I would love to hear what happens for you after you start doing that. High five yourself in the mirror and yeah, say all the beautiful and good things to yourself and notice what happens.
Lovely, lovely, Serena. Okay. Also, before we wrap up this wonderful, insightful conversation, um, there's a growing trend of people, of course, leaving behind cultural expectations, Serena. But what about those who find deep identity and strength within those very norms? I mean, can both paths be valid?
It depends what you mean by finding strength in those norms. I believe, yes, you can. You can take the best of your cultural upbringing, look for the things that inspire you, look for what you've learned from your ancestors, what they did well, their courage, their resilience, their perseverance, and borrow those things. Borrow them and let them become part of your identity too. Because we're not one person floating around just doing our own thing. We're all the byproduct and the
Hmm.
result of other people's efforts as well. So if our ancestors have done something well, and they would have, otherwise we wouldn't be here, we can borrow that from them. We can acknowledge that. We have a Chinese a proverb that says, when you drink the water, remember the source that it comes from. And so that's the idea, that we will look back to get inspiration from our ancestors in order that we can become better ancestors ourselves.
Hmm. Wow. And Serena, if our listeners would like to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way would be on LinkedIn, where I'm very active and I'm always sharing tips for introverts. And the other would be my podcast, the Quiet Warrior podcast, where also I interview people and we talk about what it takes to grow from a quiet achiever into a quiet warrior.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have the link and details in the show notes. And thank you so much, Serena. I mean, I absolutely appreciate your honesty, your presence, and your wisdom. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Sana.
So, listeners, if you are a quiet achiever who's ready to stop surviving and start leading, check out Serena's work. Connect with her on LinkedIn, and I'll have all the links in the show notes. And until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and keep choosing peace over performance.